So for my presentation, I decided to talk about guerrilla testing, a topic that I came across that I found was relatively interesting and it caught my interest, so I looked into it. So what is guerrilla testing? Well, it's something that I came across on the UX Collective originally on Medium. I always spend a lot of time on Medium. They have a lot of good articles on there about different things. So the Guerrilla testing is a simple solution for a UX tester to recruit users. It's as simple as walking into a high-traffic location, such as a coffee shop or a shopping center, and then approaching random users accordingly to test your product. It is a think aloud session in which they are given a small handful of scenarios to complete during that time. It is suggested that to only test 3 to 5 people. We have talked about that in class, and I have read that in the research that I have done. It is suggested to do that as you start with the first user and you get a lot of feedback, but as you filter through the rest of them, things begin to start becoming repetitive, so it could be a waste of time and resources. The sessions only generally last around 10 to 15 minutes. They're not too long. So before I go all into my research that I've done, this is actually my second time I've going kind of back through this presentation. I thought I should do a better job at explaining who these people were that I was getting this information from in the articles. So I'll start with Boris and Sarah. They were the two in particular that I really enjoyed learning from. Both of those links go out to YouTube. So Boris is a Google developer, and then Sarah Duty is a UX designer and entrepreneur. And I was looking into some of the things that she's done in the past, and she's very credible and very well developed. And she has her own blog. She runs uxnotebook.com. She's active on Twitter, so on and so forth, like many people are. So she had a lot going there, many platforms. Then there was Elizabeth Chester. Sorry, ignore that. Elizabeth Chester's, who was a UX designer, as well as Marcus Perker, and then David Peter Simon as well. They're all UX designers and focus on that realm of user experience. I know Elizabeth is based out of London. I can't remember where Marcus was from. I know he is from a larger city. I know David Peter Simon was from Chicago. He works at ThoughtWorks. And then Loop 11 is a UX service. And they also have a blog and share a lot of information, a lot of different articles, kind of like in a wiki sense. I was frustrated that I couldn't find a particular author on who wrote the article that I linked to Loop 11 right there, but they seem like they had a pretty good service and are pretty well developed. So with that being said, a justification for the protocol. So as students in a usability class, we are faced with the challenge of considering various personas according to the project at hand, making it hard to find users. This is something in particular that I personally kind of struggled with, and that is why I chose, when I found this topic of guerrilla testing, I decided to pursue it because I don't know, I just had really struggled to find, not struggled to find users, but I wish that I would have been able to know how to recruit users accordingly to the personas. Throughout this past semester, we were finding students that were related to the personas, and for my last project, working with Mix, that worked out perfectly. However, when we were working with the NASA project, that made it a lot more challenging. We did find students that had similar majors, but obviously there's still a huge barrier between them. But obviously I know that this is just a class. I know these are not real projects. We're not actually working for a client necessarily. So I understand why we didn't have real users, but that as somebody who is very interested in usability, that's something I wish I would have kind of got to learn and got to know how to approach. So when I saw this, I found it very interesting and was something I wanted to pursue and continue to look into, because I found a lot of comfort in, I guess what I'll share in a while about this process. So with that being said, that's why I decided to pursue it, kind of for me personally, and then also I wanted to know more about the recruiting process. In terms of a reflection, I did notice that this is a bit of a hybrid of recruitment for me. Not that I have full blown just walked into a coffee shop and interviewed 5 people and left in an hour. I've never done that, but I was at the raw deal and I had some of the people that I was going to be testing fell through last minute, so I had to approach some people in the coffee shop, and they were people I knew, not super well. I don't really hang out with them, but I know them by name. But I wasn't expecting to have to do that. I know they weren't expecting it either. It was very nice that they helped me out with that, but it was just something that I wasn't expecting to do. So it's definitely a different mentality of going into the guerrilla testing versus planning everything out. Then all the projects we were able to do this semester, they did have user testers. That was never an issue finding user testers. I was always able to find people to help. Even if, like I just said, 2 people dropped out last minute, I was still able to find other users. But I've noticed most of these people are close friends of mine, and they're reoccurring testers as well. So they kind of got used to it, I think. There was somebody in particular that helped me on all 3 projects this past semester. So with that being said, it would have been kind of nice to exert myself in the sense of, once again, working with other tester or other users that I don't know who they are. I have no idea who they are. Being comfortable interviewing them and approaching that kind of situation, whether it is more formal and traditional in the sense of setting something up, or if it is like a guerrilla testing format session. So it was just things I was thinking about here. So the background for guerrilla testing, I said that there's a think aloud session to it. I'll skip down to that second paragraph I have there and explain that it was very difficult to find find articles and background information about guerrilla testing. Every time I type in guerrilla testing, it always came back to think aloud, and I can get the history on that, which we already kind of knew from our class this past semester. But other than that, it was very challenging to find information about guerrilla testing. I mean, it did definitely seem to stem from Jacob Nielsen, the Nielsen-Norman group. So I just kind of did a little extra, just kind of went back and reviewed, if you would. So defined by Jacob Nielsen on the Nielsen-Norman group in the early 1990s, think aloud as asking the participants to vocalize their thought process while navigating through the interface or handling a prototype. So that's essentially what they're still doing. Like, even though it is guerrilla testing, it's still a think aloud session. The users are still thinking out loud. They are still going through the process and the protocol exactly like how we did on this last project. The only difference is how me as the tester would approach them, the user. So I'm not sure when guerrilla testing came into play. I'm not sure when that was kind of birthed around. All the articles I was looking at, the latest one I could think about went back to like 2010, but I feel like it'd probably go back even later than that. I even went on to the library to find some scholarly information. I couldn't find any there. It's a bit ridiculous, but maybe also because it is only in regards to picking users that it doesn't have to be, there's not a lot of information about it because all in all, it's still a think aloud session. So with that being said, the last bit of information I have there, that is very apparent in a lot of the information and material that I've been coming across, is that this idea of guerrilla testing has a lot of mixed reviews among UX professionals and those that have used it before. So application of the protocol, of course, it's positive and it's negatives, like anything else would. Some positives is I briefly went over that it only takes 15 minutes less. It doesn't take very long. It's very time efficient. The goal is to go in there and be out in an hour, being able to talk to 3 to 5 people. So it's also very inexpensive. You don't have to have any equipment. You don't have to have any tools. Of course, you need to be prepared for whatever you're going to be testing. But other than that, you don't need to have pay a lot monthly or yearly. I'm not even sure how it works as a student for these tools to be testing people. Um, it's a frugal way of testing, I suppose, is a way to look at it. And that can also work for the stakeholders who are new to the idea of usability, that are not very accustomed to the field and how it works and how testing works. They're not going to want to pour money into usability testing for their product when they don't know if it's going to work or not. Even maybe the testers don't know if it's going to work or not. So it gives a chance to kind of, dip your toes in the water and see if that's going to work out for them, and if that's something they want to continue to approach, or maybe they want to find a new method of testing. So, I mean, it really allows them to ease their way in very gently. And it's also a solution for user testing while working under a tight deadline. You don't have to make meetings, you don't have to plan around other people's schedules. You could just, if you're working in your office and need be, you need to walk down to the coffee shop downstairs, you could just walk in, and in 15 minutes, half hour, you could talk to two people, and maybe that's all you need, and it was just done like that. So, I mean, it definitely has its positives in that sense that are very, like I said, I think it's a frugal way of testing, but it also has its negatives. Sarah Duty was the one, she has her video, which I had linked, and she pointed out many of these, which were all very incredibly valid points. So the high potential of not connecting with the right user type. So you can go in there and you could interview 5 people and you can put that interface in front of them, that prototype, but maybe they have no idea, like maybe it's not applicable to their life at all whatsoever, but maybe the person in the booth next to them was. So you don't really know about the background. You're going in knowing they're strangers and you're just approaching them. You have no idea who they are. There was something that she suggested, and that was to maybe strike up with a conversation with them first and like ask about their interests in terms of what the prototype is, and depending on how they respond to that, then you could choose if you want to ask them if they would be willing to help test out a prototype. But then there's also the idea of catching them in the moment of the in-between. So that's just like, if they're shopping, clearly they're on the quest to get something, or maybe they're with a friend shopping and they're spending time together. Me personally, I like to go to the raw deal and drink tea or coffee and work on homework or whatever, and I'll put my headphones in. That's like my time to catch up. And I don't really like being interrupted. It's not that it upsets me or disgruntles me in any sense, but it's kind of my time. So I could see how other people could be disgruntled if they were to be disrupted during their moment of peace, or if they're just on a quick break from work. And I could understand that. Also, short with answers and thorough feedback. Like I said, if they're short on time, they're going to be short with their answers. They may be just saying yes to be nice, but they may not care at all whatsoever about the research you're doing. There could be a lack of a controlled environment. You won't be able to really pick what's happening. You don't know all the details of what's around you, really. Even though you're feeling like the professional, you don't really know specifics. There's no guarantee of user participation, like I said, kind of prior tying into the short answers. They may be just completely uninterested, or their mind is elsewhere. Or maybe they're just distracted. I don't know. But you may not get critical and valid feedback in that sense. And also, it just may be uncomfortable for some users to be approached by a stranger, or to participate in those think aloud sessions. I can understand, like, even in our class, there were times where we'd forget to think aloud when testing some of our peers because we're just not used to it. It's a little out of our comfort zone. So how to conduct the protocol? To first start out by, of course, creating a list of tasks for your users and prioritizing them accordingly to your goals, what you want to fix and figure out first. Then you want to turn those tasks into scenarios. I don't think I need to explain that because we've gone over that quite a little bit. And then that's where, now is here where the part where the guerrilla testing comes in, of choosing that high traffic setting, such as a coffee shop, very environmental based. You're far more focused on where you're going to go. You're going to choose that person accordingly and approach them. And you're going to be polite, but you're going to be prepared. And you're going to be willing to be okay with rejection. You're also, most people, when they use this type of testing, if they're at a coffee shop, they'll buy them a coffee, or maybe they'll buy them a snack or something of that nature. Out at a bar, even maybe buying them a drink. I'm not sure if that's the right place you want to test, but maybe some people do. I'm not sure. Then you want to supply and create those scenarios and keep detailed notes through the Think Aloud session. I read 2 contrasting pieces of information before about still using like a consent sheet to be able to record them, and then another person saying like, no, you don't need to do that. And that seemed a little backwards to me. I mean, if you're doing user testing, even if it is very casual at a coffee shop, I feel like you always need that concrete feedback. I feel like that's so vital at this day and age with the user testing that we do and the details that we can get from it. I don't understand why people wouldn't do that. So I'm kind of critical on that. And then you will conclude the user testing and, of course, thank them, buy them said drink, be courteous. And then a very, very important thing is to not repeat testing in the same place frequently due to an overlap in the demographic. You'd be testing a lot of the similar people, or there's a high percentage of that just because of who inhabits that location. And then David Peter Simon in his article talked about employing certain techniques. So to be aware of confirmation biases, that kind of actually, what he means by that is tying into what I just said about overlap in demographics, or if you are wanting to go to a particular place, to not do that because you know what the audience is going to be like. So it's important to visit other places, not just the places you're comfortable with. It's important to explain to the user what is going on and to make sure that they know that, of course, they're not being tested at all, and they don't have to worry about that. It's merely the interface or the prototype that is going to be tested. Then, of course, to be ethical, kind of going back to that point of not signing a consentment sheet or anything of that nature, to be truthful about the research that you're doing, to make it casual, make them feel comfortable. Just meeting a random stranger, that could be very uncomfortable for them, especially having an interface put in front of them. They may not work at all in that kind of field, so it may be completely out of the ordinary for them. To be participatory, engage with them, but also don't lead the participants. If they have a question, don't necessarily answer it or give it away. Just be like, I'm not sure, what do you think? And then that will ultimately give you your answer that you need for your prototype. Then to keep your eyes peeled, pay attention to detail, keep good notes, capture that feedback, and then to be a time cop, because this isn't a scheduled testing session. They're not being paid to be wary of their time and to be considerate. So then my final thoughts on the whole guerrilla testing is, I'm kind of back and forth. I feel like, for me personally as a student where I'm at, I feel like this is a very valid approach of testing users and recruiting people. And for me personally, exerting myself and talking to strangers, essentially, and kind of getting out of my comfort zone in that sense. I feel like there's a lot that I could learn from that process where I'm currently at in my UX career, if you would. But then I think about people who have been in the field for a very, very long time and are professionals and have a lot of experience under their belts and have done multiple forms of testing. I feel at that point, this guerrilla testing is kind of outdated or more like outgrown. So those are my final thoughts on it. I'm actually very curious to hear yours. If you've heard about this, I'm sure you have. I would love to hear about it. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts. Sorry it was a little bare. I've been up for 37 hours, but it's all good. Got it all done. And thank you for a great semester, and I hope you have a really great summer.